In this video, we'll look at what makes the Druid a great class and not so great a class, and at the end, we'll give the verdict on how good was the Druid really. Druids have abilities that no other class has. The ability to shapeshift into a werewolf and into a werebear. Druids stay true to the archetype by using the forces of nature such as wind and fire, as well as calling upon wildlife such as spirit bears and spirit wolves, and even vines and spirits to come to their aid. To determine how good Druids are, we will look at three popular builds: Wind Druid, Fury Druid, and Rabies Druid. We'll look at leveling speed, endgame competitiveness, gear dependence, and much more. With all that said, let's start with the Wind Druid. Now, the Wind Druid is also known as the Hurricane Druid or the Tornado Druid, but is a powerful magic finding build which is based around the elemental skill tree. The main sources of damage with this build are cold and physical, and since this build relies on more than one damage type, it's able to avoid monster immunities and continue progressing with ease. In this build, Tornado is the main source of physical damage, and Hurricane provides a large AoE cold damage ability. This build also utilizes 1-point wonders such as Raven, Summon Grizzly, Summon Spirit Wolf, Arctic Blast, Summon Direwolf, and Oak Sage. Other than those, the build primarily maxes out Tornado, Hurricane, Twister, and Cyclone Armor. Cyclone Armor is a damage absorbability that actually only absorbs fire, cold, and lightning damage and receives synergies from the abilities we just listed previously. What's strong about this build is that it is a safe build with the cold damage, the cyclone armor, and summons all to help tank and absorb damage. The summons can also be quite powerful, and of course having more than one type of damage once again is very useful. Since cold damage is being utilized with Hurricane, an Infinity Mercenary can be helpful with this build, or Insight for the Meditation Aura if you prefer mana regeneration more. The downsides of any type of build using Tornado is that it's hard to aim since it seems to just spin off in any random direction. The build also lacks mobility, so until you get Enigma, it's certainly on the slower side. And the best in-slot items for this build are also very rare. This build is not one you'd want to jump right into right off the bat. Instead, you'd want to level with a Firestorm elemental build and transition into this build once you get a higher level. Overall, this is one of the best Druid builds you can run, and it falls a little bit below top tier. Druids aren't necessarily known for having the best builds in the game, but if you're picking Druid, this will definitely be your top pick in terms of competitive builds. Next, let's talk about the Fury Druid build. I love shapeshifting builds. Now, this build is utilizing Werewolf and is known for being able to achieve some of the highest possible damage and life values in all of Diablo 2. This build, of course, uses Fury, which is its namesake, and Feral Rage. Now, Fury is your main source of physical damage, and Feral Rage will provide you with faster run walk, life stolen per hit, and plus damage and plus attack rating bonuses. Because of these bonuses, the build will want you to keep Feral Rage stacks up as often as possible to keep those bonuses. You'll also need to recast summons as needed, such as Heart of the Wolverine, Oak Sage, and Summon Grizzly as needed. This build tries to max out Werewolf, Lycanthropy, Feral Rage, Fury, and Heart of Wolverine. Other than these shape-shifting skills, the build also does get 1-point wonders such as Oak Sage, which contributes to getting that massive life value, as well as Summon Spirit Wolf, Direwolf, and Grizzly. Now, the weaknesses of this build are that it needs increased attack speed, or IAS, on its weapon in order to maximize its damage per second, or DPS. And because of these stat dependencies, the best in slot items for this build tend to be on the more rare side. However, the strengths of this build are that it's super tanky with that massive life pool, the strong summons, and the build is great at single target damage, which makes this build really excel in the end game. To compare this build with other builds, it actually kind of falls behind. With the only physical damage at its disposal, it can run into trouble with immunities, it's gear dependent to really shine, and even with a huge health pool, this build doesn't run with a lot of defense. It's considered a step below the Wind Druid in terms of overall competitiveness, but it's not the worst build in the game, and you can definitely have a lot of fun with it. Now, the last build we'll look at today for the Druid is the Rabies Druid. This build utilizes Rabies as the primary ability. What's different with this build is that instead of physical damage, poison is actually the primary damage source, and physical is the backup with Feral Rage. With multiple sources of damage, this build has more ability to get around immunes. Rabies is actually a DOT, or damage over time, which is great for being able to handle multiple targets at once. give each one rabies, and your DPS, or damage per second, can get really high. This build is also similar to the Fury build in that you can either use an Oak Sage for massive life pool or Heart of Wolverine if you're trying to maximize your physical damage. Overall, though, this build also falls short because it requires very specific gear to work. The actual attack can even be interrupted, which can be annoying, and the build doesn't do a ton of damage compared to other builds from other classes. The build also only really does well in the end game. You wouldn't want to go this build any earlier than then. The pros, however, are that this build can be quite tanky. It's a more unique play style than other builds, and that can be a lot of fun. And of course, you get to enjoy the strong Druid summons. To conclude, how good was the Druid really? Well, Druids are a class that the hardcore usually don't play first, or if they are played, it's more for fun. Druids don't have a reputation for being the most min-max class or top tier, but one that's more of a fun, unique playstyle that other classes just don't have access to. That's not to say a Wind Druid can't be competitive. With the right gear and in the hands of a skilled player, a Wind Druid can be extremely effective. Also, Druids are one of a kind. Transforming into animals, Druids only. Many people claim that playing a Druid is the most fun that they've ever had on Diablo 2 ever. So if you're looking for fun over being the most overpowered and you love the class fantasy of being one with nature and shapeshifting into animals, Druid might just be for you. Thanks for watching, and if you like the video, don't forget to give this video a like. That means a whole lot to me. And if you want to see even more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. My name is Toy House, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.